She threw herself over his daughter during the shooting. The Mafia boss made her his wife. Neon signs flickered through the downpour, painting reflections on the wet asphalt, while distant sirens wailed like mournful ghosts. In the heart of this city ruled by fear and whispers, few dared to walk alone at night. Yet Alara Vance moved steadily through the puddled streets, her coat wrapped tightly around her shoulders, her mind alert to every shadow. She had never sought trouble, but somehow, trouble always found her. Her life had been a long string of choices that demanded courage, sometimes more than her heart could bear. Tonight, her steps were guided not by fear, but by instinct, the same instinct that had kept her alive more times than she could count. As she turned a corner into the plaza near the center of the city, the world erupted into chaos. Gunfire cracked sharply against the echoing walls, and the screams of frightened people filled the air. Sparks flew as bullets tore through metal and stone, and a car overturned, sending glass flying like shards of ice. In the midst of the chaos, she saw her, the small, fragile figure of a little girl caught directly in the line of fire. Ilara's breath caught. She didn't hesitate. Without thinking, she threw herself over the child, pressing her body to shield her from the bullets. Pain tore through her side as a shot found its mark, but she gritted her teeth, refusing to let go. Stay down, she hissed, covering the girl with her own. Time slowed, and for a moment, the noise faded into a single heartbeat. She felt the little girl tremble against her, tiny hands clutching her coat. Alara whispered words she didn't even fully hear herself say, promising safety that she couldn't yet guarantee. The firefight seemed endless, but in the shadows, someone arrived. Tall, imposing, and unmistakably commanding, Adrian Valerius, the city's feared mafia boss, appeared. His black coat clung to him in the rain, and his eyes, dark, piercing, and unyielding, scanned the scene with the precision of a predator. When he saw Alara shielding his daughter, something shifted in him, though he didn't immediately understand what. "Move," he commanded in a low, cold voice, signaling his men to clear the plaza. Bullets still flew, but Adrian's presence brought a momentary order, a deadly calm that forced even the attackers to hesitate. Alara, blood seeping through her fingers and staining the child's coat, looked up at him. Their eyes met for the first time, and in that instant, a silent recognition passed between them, a recognition of courage, defiance, and unspoken strength. Adrian stepped forward, his movements controlled and deliberate. He knelt beside Alara and Isabella, assessing the damage. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his tone not soft but carrying a rare undercurrent of concern. I'll survive," Alara managed, her voice strained but steady. She's fine. That's what matters." Adrian's gaze flickered to his daughter, who clung to Alara, her eyes wide with shock and awe. Isabella's trust in this stranger, this woman who had risked her life without thought, seemed to pierce even Adrian's hardened heart. "You've made yourself part of my world now," he said finally, his voice low, almost a warning. "Whether you want it or not." Alara's brow furrowed, a mixture of defiance and confusion crossing her face. "Your world isn't mine," she said, forcing a smile through the pain. "And I don't want it to be." Adrian's eyes held hers for a long moment. He was used to control, to obedience, to people bending under his authority. But Alara was different. She wasn't afraid, not in the way most were. That startled him, and it intrigued him. The sirens drew closer, and medics began to move through the plaza. Alara carefully handed Isabella over to Adrian's trusted men, making sure the little girl was safe. Then, with Adrian's silent insistence, she allowed herself to be carried to his private car, away from the chaos of the city streets. Inside the car, the silence was tense. Alara pressed a hand to her wound, feeling the sting of pain but also a strange surge of adrenaline. Adrian drove without a word, his hands firm on the wheel, his eyes focused ahead yet somehow always aware of her presence beside him. "You could have died," he said finally, breaking the silence. His tone was not anger but a sharp acknowledgement of the risk she had taken. "And Isabella could have died," Alara replied evenly. "That was more important than me." Adrian's jaw tightened. He had seen many brave acts, many acts of loyalty, but rarely one so reckless, so selfless. In that moment, he realized that this woman, this stranger, possessed a courage that could rival his own. By the time they reached his mansion, the rain had slowed to a steady drizzle. The grand building loomed above the city, a fortress of stone and iron, both beautiful and intimidating. Inside, the warmth of marble halls and flickering torchlight was a stark contrast to the storm outside. Guards moved silently around them, eyes sharp, but they parted without question as Adrian led Alara to a private room prepared for her recovery. She sank onto the bed, exhaustion finally overtaking her adrenaline. Adrian remained standing, silent and watchful. The wound in her side was deep, but not fatal, and the medics worked quickly, their efficiency precise. Yet even as they tended to her, Alara sensed the weight of Adrian's gaze, not just observing her but measuring her, understanding her in ways words could not capture. "You act without thinking," he said quietly once the medics left, "but sometimes that's what matters most." Alara lifted her head, meeting his eyes with defiance. "I act because it's right, not because I think about the consequences." A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched Adrian's lips, a rare break in the otherwise stoic mask he wore. "And yet, you are in my world now. That will come with consequences, whether you like it or not." Alara felt a shiver run down her spine, not from fear, but from the intensity of his presence. There was power in him, power tempered by rare glimpses of honor and loyalty. And there was a strange pull, a tension she couldn't ignore between caution and something deeper, something dangerous yet compelling. Night fell outside the mansion, and the storm subsided into a gentle drizzle. Isabella slept peacefully in a nearby room, safe for the first time in what had felt like weeks of danger. Alara lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing with questions, doubts, and the strange stirrings of emotions she didn't yet understand. Adrian remained in the room, leaning against the doorway, watching over her as if she were a treasure both fragile and priceless. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and steady, carrying a weight that made the room feel smaller, more intimate. "You are brave," he said simply. "But bravery in my world is dangerous, and yet I cannot ignore what you've done. You have changed the rules even if you do not see it." Alara shifted, wincing slightly at the pain in her side. "I didn't do it to change rules. I did it because it was right. Because she mattered more than fear, more than my life." Adrian's eyes darkened, not with anger but with something heavier, more complicated. "And now, because of that choice, you are bound to me and my world. I will not allow anyone to harm you or her. But you will have to decide where your loyalty truly lies." The words hung in the air, thick with tension and unspoken truths. Alara's heart pounded, not from fear, but from the weight of what had just happened. She had thrown herself into danger, saved a life, and in doing so, stepped into a world she had no intention of entering. Yet as she looked into Adrian's eyes, she could feel the unspoken promise, the silent bond formed in that plaza of chaos and gunfire. A bond neither could deny, forged in courage, trust, and the quiet spark of something neither wanted to name. As the night deepened, the city outside slept uneasily under the storm clouds, unaware that within the walls of Adrian Valerius's mansion, a new story had begun, one of courage, loyalty, and a dangerous, undeniable connection that would change everything. And for the first time, Alara understood the truth of Adrian's words. She had made herself part of his world. Whether she wanted it or not, there was no turning back. Hook/cliffhanger. Adrian's voice, soft but commanding, whispered through the darkness. "Are you ready to pay it?" The mansion was quiet in the early hours, but the silence felt heavier than the storm outside. Rain still tapped against the tall windows, a rhythmic reminder of the night's chaos. Ilara lay awake, the memory of gunfire and screams pressing on her mind. She could hear soft footsteps along the polished floors, Adrian moving through his domain, precise and deliberate as ever. Despite her fatigue, she rose and walked to the window, gazing at the city below. The streets glittered with wet reflections of neon lights, but the beauty was cold, distant, and unforgiving. Her mind wandered to Isabella, sleeping peacefully in her room. That little girl had no idea how close she had come to death, or how much Ilara's life had just changed. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. Adrian stepped inside, his coat dripping with the last traces of rain. His presence filled the room, commanding yet quiet, a mixture of danger and calm that unsettled and fascinated her at the same time. "You should rest," he said, his voice low, carrying the weight of authority and something softer, almost unspoken concern. "I am resting," Ilara replied, sitting on the edge of the bed, her gaze fixed on him. "But I can't stop thinking. About her, about what happened." Adrian's eyes softened slightly, though the hard edge never left them. "You acted with courage. That is not common. And yet you did not act recklessly. You protected her without asking for permission, without seeking reward. That is rare, even in my world." Ilara met his gaze, noting the flicker of something she couldn't name: approval, curiosity, or perhaps admiration. She shifted uncomfortably, aware of the tension between them, a tension that neither had acknowledged but that pulsed in the silence. "Your world," she said slowly, "is dangerous. I am not used to living in a place where people fear for their lives every day." Adrian's lips pressed into a thin line. "Then you will learn quickly. Danger is constant, fear is necessary. But loyalty, courage, and trust, those are rarer still. You have shown all three in one night." The words hung in the air, heavy and charged. Ilara felt a strange pull, a mixture of respect, fear, and something deeper she could not yet name. She had seen the darkness in the city, in the people who ran it, but she had also glimpsed the human side of Adrian Valerius, a man feared by all, yet capable of protecting those he loved with unwavering determination. Over the next days, Ilara adjusted to life in the mansion. She was not a prisoner, yet she was never free. Guards followed her discreetly, watching every movement, while servants carried out their duties with quiet efficiency. She moved through the halls with the grace of someone who had learned to survive, and yet she was aware of Adrian's presence in every room she entered, a constant, silent observation that both unsettled and fascinated her. Isabella was the center of it all. The little girl's eyes would light up whenever Ilara entered the room, her trust and gratitude a constant reminder of the choice Ilara had made that night. Ilara found herself smiling more often, feeling a warmth she had long buried beneath years of independence and survival. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold, Ilara found herself walking the mansion's gardens. The rain had stopped, leaving the flowers and trees glistening with drops of water. Adrian appeared behind her, silent as a shadow, and joined her on the winding path. "You are changing," he said quietly, as if speaking to himself as much as to her. "Not just in the way you look at this place, but in the way you carry yourself. You are learning its rhythm, its rules, without losing who you are." Ilara turned to him, startled by his words. "I am only surviving. I do not belong here, and I do not intend to." Adrian's dark eyes studied her. "Perhaps, but belonging is not always a choice. Sometimes it is demanded by circumstances beyond our control." Their conversations were always a dance, a subtle game of words and unspoken meanings. He was the master of power, control, and influence, yet with her, he showed glimpses of something he rarely allowed: vulnerability. And she, who had lived her life relying on no one, found herself drawn to him, curious about the man behind the fearsome reputation. Then came the test, a threat that neither could ignore, A rival gang seeking to destabilize Adrian's empire targeted Alara. The news reached the mansion late at night. Masked men had been spotted near her usual street, waiting for an opportunity. Alara's first instinct was to confront them alone. She could not stand being caged, even by safety or authority. Adrian, however, had learned enough about her courage and her stubbornness to anticipate this move. "You cannot face this alone," he said, his tone sharper than usual but with an edge of concern that betrayed his feelings. "I can," she replied, "and I will. I cannot let fear control me." He studied her, his eyes narrowing, yet he could not argue further. Her determination was unyielding. "Very well," he said at last, "but if you fall, I will hold nothing back. You will not leave this world unprotected." The confrontation was swift and tense. Alara faced the attackers with calm precision, moving through shadows, using wit and intuition rather than brute force. She disarmed and outsmarted them, but one shot grazed her arm, drawing blood. Just as the situation grew dire, Adrian arrived with his men, descending like a storm upon their enemies. Within moments, the attackers were subdued and the threat eliminated. Alara, breathing heavily, turned to see Adrian standing before her, his coat damp from the rain, hair sticking to his forehead. His gaze was intense, filled with a mix of anger, relief, and something else she could not yet name. "You are reckless," he said, his voice low and steady, "and yet I cannot deny the strength and courage you have shown. You are extraordinary, Alara, but my world is not kind to the extraordinary. You must understand that." Alara met his gaze, her own unwavering. "I understand it, and I am ready to face it, whatever it takes." Adrian's expression softened just slightly. He stepped closer, so close that the space between them seemed to hum with tension. "You are changing the rules," he said quietly, "not just for yourself, but for me. I am not used to this challenge to my authority, and yet I cannot look away." The words were a confession, though unspoken in full. Alara felt her heart quicken, the pull between them undeniable. The walls of power, fear, and control that had defined Adrian's world were beginning to shift, and she was at the center of that change. Days passed, and the tension between them grew. Small moments, shared glances, unspoken challenges, fleeting touches, added layers of complexity to their relationship. Adrian allowed her freedoms, yet he could not hide his possessiveness, his desire to protect both her and Isabella. And Alara, for the first time in her life, found herself considering a bond she had never wanted, yet could not ignore. The mansion itself seemed to respond to these changes. A family heirloom, an ancient locket in Adrian's private study, glimmered faintly whenever danger approached, its magic subtle but undeniable. Isabella, sensing the importance of Alara, often clutched her hand or whispered to her, and the locket would glow softly, as if acknowledging the bond forming between the three of them. One evening, as they watched the sunset from the balcony, rain threatening once more, Adrian spoke in a rare moment of candor. "I am not a man used to trust. People serve me out of fear, loyalty, or necessity. But you have chosen to act out of courage, out of compassion. And that changes everything." Alara looked at him, her gaze steady. "I do not act for you. I act for what is right, but I will not deny what has grown between us, nor will I deny that I care for Isabella." Adrian's dark eyes softened, and for a moment the powerful, fearsome Mafia boss seemed almost human, vulnerable, open, and hopeful. He reached out, gently taking her hand in his. "Then you must understand," he said quietly, "that in my world care comes with responsibility. Protection is not optional, and loyalty is everything." Alara felt the weight of his words, the unspoken promise and warning entwined together. She understood now that her choice, her courage, had irrevocably bound her to Adrian Valerius and his world. There was no turning back, hook/cliffhanger. "The world outside will not forgive us," he whispered, "and soon you will see how deep this darkness truly runs. Are you ready to face it with me? The mansion was quiet, but the calm was fragile, hanging like a thin veil over a city that never truly slept. Outside, the streets shimmered with rain-soaked reflections, and somewhere in the distance, sirens echoed faintly, a reminder that danger never truly rested. Inside, the warmth of candlelight contrasted sharply with the cold, dark world beyond the walls. Ilara moved through the halls, careful not to wake Isabella, who slept peacefully in her room. The events of the past days weighed on her, her decision to protect the child, the growing tension with Adrian, the unspoken bond forming between them. She had entered his world by choice and by fate, and now there was no turning back. Adrian watched her from a distance, leaning against the doorway, his dark eyes never leaving her form. He had faced many threats, conquered rivals, and controlled entire neighborhoods with fear and strategy. Yet Ilara challenged him in a way no one else had. Her courage, independence, and unwavering morality unsettled him, but also drew him closer than he had allowed himself to go in years. "Ilara," he said finally, his voice low but steady, "we cannot remain in this quiet forever. The city will not forgive what has happened. And neither will our enemies." She turned to him, meeting his gaze. "I am not afraid," she said, though she felt the familiar flutter of uncertainty. "I know danger exists and I am ready, but I need to know, do you trust me?" Adrian stepped closer, the intensity of his presence pressing in around her. "I do," he said simply, yet with a weight that made her heart quicken. "But trust is not enough. You must understand the world you have stepped into. It will test you and it will test me. Together, we must face it." The next day brought a storm of events. A betrayal within Adrian's inner circle had been discovered. One of his trusted lieutenants had colluded with a rival gang, attempting to destabilize his empire while undermining Ilara's safety. The revelation struck like lightning through the mansion, shaking the foundation of Adrian's controlled world. Ilara was beside him as he strategized, watching his mind work with precision, calculating risks and considering contingencies. She saw the man behind the fearsome reputation, a man burdened by responsibility yet unwilling to compromise his principles. She realized in that moment that she had come to care not only for Isabella but for Adrian himself, a man both terrifying and magnetic. "You understand what must be done," Adrian said, his hand briefly brushing hers. The touch was fleeting but electric, sending a current of tension that neither could ignore. "We cannot allow weakness. Not now, not ever." Ilara nodded, determination flashing in her eyes. "I understand, and I will stand with you." Together, they confronted the traitor and the rival gang. The encounter was tense, a careful dance of strategy and courage. Ilara's quick thinking and fearlessness proved invaluable, disarming the attackers and outsmarting the traitor before Adrian's men subdued them. Once the danger had passed, the mansion fell into an uneasy silence. Ilara and Adrian stood on the balcony, watching the city below, its lights shimmering like stars fallen to earth. Rain had returned, a gentle drizzle this time, washing the streets clean. "You are extraordinary," Adrian said, his voice quiet, almost tender. "Not just for what you did, but for who you are. Your courage, your loyalty, it has changed me." Ilara felt her heart stir at his words. "I did not do it to change you," she replied softly. "I did it because it was right, because Isabella mattered, and I care about you too. That has nothing to do with fear or duty. It is my choice." For the first time, Adrian allowed himself to step closer, closing the space between them. The air seemed to thrum with unspoken emotion, a tension that was both thrilling and frightening. "Then understand this," he said, his voice low and commanding, yet laced with vulnerability. "In my world, care comes with responsibility. Protection is not optional, and loyalty is everything. You have proven yourself in all of these." Ilara met his gaze, her own steady despite the storm of feelings inside her. "I am ready," she said simply, "for whatever comes next." Adrian reached out, placing the ancient family locket in her hands. It glimmered faintly in the candlelight, the magic within it responding to the bond that had formed between them. Isabella watched from the doorway, eyes wide, a small smile tugging at her lips. The locket symbolized more than protection. It was a promise of unity, courage, and trust, a tangible reflection of what they had built together. "You are now part of this family," Adrian said, his voice steady. "Not because of fear or power or obligation, but because you chose it, and because you have saved more than my daughter. You have saved me too." Alara felt the weight of his words, the sincerity in his gaze. She realized that her life had irrevocably changed, that she had found a bond she had never anticipated, and that the man before her, feared by all, untouchable by many, had opened his heart to her in ways she had never imagined possible. The next weeks were a time of quiet growth and understanding. Alara integrated into the mansion's life, earning the respect of those who had once been wary of her presence. She trained with Adrian's men, learned the rules of the city's underworld, and shared moments of tenderness with Isabella, who had begun to see her not just as a protector, but as family. Adrian and Alara's relationship deepened, a slow, deliberate dance of trust and emotional intimacy. Their interactions were charged with subtlety, glances that lingered too long, touches that conveyed unspoken promises, and conversations that balanced authority, respect, and burgeoning affection. Each moment built upon the last, forming a connection that neither could deny. Then came the moment that would define their bond. A rival faction, seeking revenge for their failed attack, launched a coordinated assault on Adrian's territory. The streets erupted in violence once more, testing the limits of courage, loyalty, and strategy. Alara did not hesitate. She fought alongside Adrian, her skill and bravery matched only by his own. Together, they navigated the chaos, protecting Isabella and their home, demonstrating the strength of their bond and the trust they had built. When the dust settled, the mansion and its occupants had survived, but the threat remained. Adrian turned to Alara, his dark eyes searching hers. "You have proven yourself," he said, his voice steady, yet full of emotion. "You are not just part of this world, you are part of my life, and I will not let anything harm you or Isabella again." Alara felt a warmth spread through her chest, a sense of belonging she had never known. "And I will stand with you," she replied. "Always." The city outside continued its restless rhythm, but within the walls of the mansion, a fragile sanctuary had formed. Love, loyalty, and courage intertwined, creating a bond that was both unbreakable and sacred. In the quiet of the evening, Adrian placed the locket around Alara's neck. It rested against her heart, a symbol of trust, protection, and the unspoken promise between them. He reached out, gently taking her hand in his. "You have saved more than my daughter. You have saved me," he said softly. Alara met his gaze, her own eyes reflecting a mixture of relief, admiration, and something deeper, an understanding that their lives were now forever linked, bound by courage, sacrifice, and an unshakable bond of trust and love. As they stood together, the storm outside faded into a gentle rain, washing the city clean. The world beyond the mansion remained dangerous, filled with uncertainty and threats, yet within these walls, love had taken root, quiet, resilient, and powerful. Closing thought. "Whatever comes," he whispered, "we face it together." Alara smiled, a mixture of fear and courage in her heart. "Together," she echoed, ready for whatever the world would throw at them next. In that moment, the bond forged in shadows, sacrifice, and trust had transformed their lives forever. The story of fear, courage, and love had reached a turning point, but the legend of their bond was only beginning.